order.
Going on the DMV?
Yeah, I'd like to go on the, until Becca comes in. So, okay, we are live this morning. Good morning, everybody. This is Senate Transportation Committee. It's Thursday morning, February 16th. And we're going to continue our discussion with the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles and Deputy, talking about the miscellaneous DMV bills so we can wrap it up. And I think we have the latest copy, Mike told, if we have.
Yeah.
I thought we did. Yes, we do. Okay, good morning. Perfect timing. Join us this morning. You have a bill before us. And we'd like to have you go over it for us because we have DMV here now this morning. We're trying to get this miscellaneous bill out as soon as possible. But
Sure.
could you give us an overview of your bill?
Yes, I apologize. I stepped into committee and they said Senator Mazza would like to see you. So
We're trying to get this wrapped up this week.
yes,
So
so I don't have a copy of the bill, but I'm happy to walk through it if someone
sure.
could provide me with one, or I could get my iPad. Okay. So thank you for the record,
Thank
Rebecca
you.
White, and I serve the community of Windsor County District. And I introduced S64 out of my experience on the House side. And it starts with section 1, which you'll also see section, and tell me if I'm going into too much detail or when to cut it off, but
Briefly what you have.
okay, so section 1 and section 13 both relate to noise, and on our roads, we have constituents in my district who are experiencing loud noise when it comes to trucks. And section 1 looks at how we regulate unmuffled brakes, which is not a new conversation for this committee.
Jake breaks.
And I'm not using the term Jake
Okay.
brakes because it's the manufacturer. It's like saying Kleenex versus like tissues is my understanding. So I'm using
But
unmuffled.
that's a noise you're referring to? Okay, that's just so we, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that's section 1. Then section 2, you may be familiar with from last year's DMV miscellaneous bill, which did not ultimately pass. This is some idling language that I worked with Representative McCormick on last session. And I think Legislative Council and I took another look at. You come to section 3. This may be familiar to the committee from work that former Representative Ann Pugh had done around car seats and child restraint. So the goal of this language is to bring us up to what my understanding is the Association of Pediatricians recommendation around car seats and child seats.
We're not there now, is that what you're referring to?
That's my understanding.
Interesting, I thought they have to pass a certain test.
Yeah. And I would refer to Legislative Council,
Okay.
I see Anthea's in the room, on where our standards differ from what is recommended by that association compared to maybe federal regulation. So that continues into section 4 with an outreach campaign. My hope there was if we're not comfortable moving forward with further regulation, then instead we would do work to support child restraints and educating parents, particularly around child restraints. I know in our community in Hartford, for example, you can go to the fire station and they will adjust or show you how.
They have openings in the police will put on. You can go and have your seat inspected, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would say anything we can do if we don't want to
To make it safe.
change, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. And that continues only until section 5, which we get into bike head related changes. This comes out of what we had in the DMV miscellaneous bill that did not pass last year. Same
We're
with.
working on bike safety proposal now. This committee is working on bike safety proposal, which will be addressed in session.
What is your bike head? What's in your?
So this looks specifically around signage, and we have anytime there's a repavement, it's expanding the shoulder size or width.
It's possible.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, so the idea is if you're doing the work, expand the shoulder.
Okay.
And that could be done through a few different ways. You could narrow the lane is something that's called out, or lowering the speed limit could be another option.
Okay. Yes. Mike.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you're asking to narrow the travel lane and then reduce the speed, or all of them, or one or the other, or just, are you just putting these in as suggestions, or this is part of the bill? You want to narrow the travel lane and you want to lower the speed?
So my understanding with how the language is written is that you could do any of those options to meet the criteria, or you could do all of the options to meet the criteria. The goal being bike and pedestrian safety.
So we just were talking about that, Becca. We're doing a major highway on Route 2 in Senator Pertlick's district.
So we call it the Danville Road.
We keep
Ah.
we keep arguing whose district it's in.
So, one of the things, these bill, Route 5, you're very familiar with Route 5.
Live on
And
this.
so, just from the geography, and sometimes it's wetlands and so forth, and we talked about the fact that a lot of them have utility poles.
Sure.
And so there are limitations from an engineering and from an environmental perspective. Are you talking about when it is feasible, or are you saying that this would be a requirement regardless of the attributes of that particular road segment?
My understanding is the main reason that we're not doing the work is because of cost in these situations. So the idea here is if it isn't feasible, like you literally could not based on our other regulations or utility poles, I think that that's a slightly different question than what I'm trying to change in the bill, which is to address if there is an increased cost potentially, that is usually what makes a decision happen around a project. So for me, I'm balancing that I do see a cost, which could be the situation you're describing where they could say the engineering costs or all of that is too great to outweigh the benefit.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful. Because we have some language already, so I guess we need to look at what's in place now relative to this.
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of raise the threshold for when we, or sorry, I would want to raise the threshold of when we choose to, like the financial amount could be greater than what we're considering now. Because I find that when I talk to constituents, the reasons that they're choosing not to bike or to walk is largely safety. So that cost is being shifted to people who are still using a car when they would otherwise feel more comfortable safely biking or walking. So that's not my weighing of it. Happy to, thank you for that
What
question.
about the trees?
The trees come up later. Do you want me to skip
You're-
I'm
forward?
sorry, I'm always starting at the back.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm at the end again?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think this next
Right,
section
right.
is the climate, is the clean street, or sorry, complete streets and then climate related planning. I'm pretty sure trees are a little further down. I think
That's right, I'll
section
continue
8.
through the bill.
Okay.
We passed a bill,
Senator
complete
Kissel
streets in
had us all
2011.
back, so.
So this is some modifications to this existing statute
This section 6.
on complete streets.
Yeah, so
We
this
passed a
is.
bill in 2011.
Yeah, so this is to expand complete streets. This is also coming out of what we saw with the DFV miscellaneous bill work that the House did last year. I'm extremely impressed with the work, and this actually could be a T bill rather than DFV miscellaneous bill piece, just to put that out there.
Yeah, I was thinking about that.
Yeah,
It's not
so-
really a miscellaneous DMV bill.
Yeah, I felt like it'd be good to give all my recommendations one vehicle. So I would take your decision-making
Okay,
as better for than mine and where it should go. But we have the Global Warming Solutions Act that we passed. We have requirements that we have to meet. This is more explicit language in my view to help us get there using the framework of complete streets. Okay, so then that brings us to section 7, which also expands that conversation, including language around the climate action plan being in statute. So referring back to legislation that we've already done around global warming. It includes emissions modeling. If you continue on to section or to page 12, And that brings us squarely to section 8, which is, I believe, what Senator Kitchell was referring to, which is the landscaping and streetscaping section.
Was this in last year's bill in the miscellaneous?
No, Senator
This-
Hardy had a separate
yeah.
bill,
This is
Oh, okay.
exactly.
which, and it started, I think, with a tree removal in Middlebury.
Right, which the DMV and AOT and everybody went to tree wardens and I think had permission to remove.
Okay, go right ahead.
Okay, so moving past that section, unless you'd like me to spend more time, we get to section 10. Well, so you get to section 9, section 10 all together. Same with section 11 around the tree and treescaping. Then we get to section 12, which is the perennial issue of transportation, which is truck weights. So
Increase them.
I would like to have more limitations around.
You want the 90,000 pounds, you want lower?
No, I want to raise the actual weight that trucks can have in this section. But I also want to allow for, well, long-term, I think that we do need to have a bigger conversation about truck weights.
Okay, yeah, that's a big subject.
Yeah,
Okay, we won't talk about
Not
that.
related to Woodstock.
this section is not, in my view, in response to what changed in Woodstock, which I do represent. This comes out of language that was considered in the DMV.
Well, this is
miscellaneous
just gonna
bill
know
last.
where we're gonna
I
discuss
believe.
it, whether it's DMV, miscellaneous or CBL, so. Okay.
But I also would
Yeah, go ahead.
want to just,
Sorry to interrupt.
I would also just want to check in with legislative council. My apologies. We went through a few iterations of this conversation, so I don't want to speak too specifically on it. And I apologize. I was not aware that I was coming in this
No,
morning. And I would've
just,
spent
we're
more
trying to
time.
wrap up the teeth of the miscellaneous
Yeah.
bill. If we didn't know what pertained to this or what pertained to
Yes.
transportation, so as long as we get a brief overview of what's happening, yes.
That would be one question I have, don't need to answer now, is if any of this really is germane to DMV bill and not that it could be in the transportation bill, but specifically on the exhaust, can you expound upon what you want to accomplish with this? Do you feel like people out there are intentionally engineering their exhaust to be louder, or are they just avoiding additional expense and cost when they're with older vehicles, that they're not correcting the exhaust to make it quieter? Section 1.
Is this section 1 you're
Yeah.
talking about? Yeah,
Excessive noise, excessive.
They do it intentionally.
yeah.
The truckers don't do that, it's the way it comes from the factory, the truck.
So I think I'm worried there's two things that's happening here. There's Jake brakes or engine brakes that are just loud when you use them. And then I see in here like intentionally changing the exhaust. Are you saying that there's a problem with people?
We had the bill last year from Chris Bray that was trying to go through and get rid of aftermarket exhausts, and all of that as well. So it looks like it's are you trying to do both of the trucks and cars with one swoop, or?
So I think I've gotten 2 questions, so I'm happy to respond first
Yeah.
to yours, Senator Chittenden, which is, what is the intent of folks when they're doing this? And I personally wouldn't speak to that. What I'm most concerned about is when folks are choosing to change their exhaust or their brakes to benefit themselves saving money, or maybe there's folks trying to make a statement. I mean, we've heard about the clouds of smoke that people put forward. I'm not necessarily worried about that in this section, although you certainly could look at that as a bigger question. I'm trying to respond to concerns that I heard from constituents who are experiencing just the constant noise. And if there's something we can do to enforce and make less vague our excessive noise and exhaust policies, I think that we should consider it. So don't know if I would speak to intent, but I don't necessarily think it's a malicious, I'm trying to make my neighbors angry. It's this could possibly save me money I'm not quite sure. If there are safety benefits, I'm not aware of them. So then to your
I'm
question,
good.
Senator
Yeah, we
Ingalls,
answered it.
okay.
Yeah, thanks.
What else did it go? That's it?
So we have one more section, I
Okay.
believe, at the end that we have not discussed, which is section 13 around the study of noise abatement programs. My thought was, if we're going to look at regulating or enforcing noise and exhaust, we should also talk about alternatives, and are there ways that we can have noise abatement? I think vegetation, walls, things that can make individuals hear it less if we're not going to change how people are.
But I put in my speed bumps too.
Yeah, but you know, whatever you want.
Wait, what's the
What do you
speed
want, where do you want to
bump?
put speed bump?
Yeah.
I think it's great traffic slowing myself. You talk about calming. I think that would work.
Well, we're doing it in a lot of places. Yes, go ahead.
Every day I have to mention South Burlington and UVM, so here's my first South Burlington reference,
You
but
need speed bumps, do you?
but I do need walls. So in the last 8 years on the city council, it's come up many times, where 89 just bisects, it goes right through the city of South Burlington, and there's stretches where there's neighborhoods where their backyard is the interstate. So other cities, when I drive through Boston, I drive through more densely populated areas, they have those walls. One thing they did explore at the airport, I want to say 15 years ago, were the living walls. So I'm intrigued by this from South Burlington's perspective, and
Well, what was there first, the interstate or the houses?
it sort of came together.
Okay,
But
I think the interstate was first, is that correct?
It's not unheard of. I don't think they look that bad. I mean, as opposed to.
Along the
backyards.
interstate in Massachusetts, there are a lot
The
of walls.
developer, when they developed it, they should put some procedures or something with the permit process.
But these,
City
they
council.
developed.
But I'm interested to know what we could be doing more as a state that other states do to build those walls that improve the quality of life of people living close to airports and to interstates.
Okay.
You can do other things. I could talk all day about airports if you want.
No,
Okay, anything else?
I don't.
Okay,
Thank you, Senator Mazza.
Thank you.
The last section is section 14, which are the effective dates. And if I could just say kind of broadly why I introduced this piece of legislation. I served on House Transportation, and while I so appreciate the work that the Department of Motor Vehicles does and the work of of AOT, because again, there's pieces that would be germane to both bills. What I'm concerned about is that we haven't had a DMV miscellaneous bill that was crafted fully by the legislature in a long time. And what I hear from constituents is that they don't necessarily feel like they're being heard on concerns that we might collectively think are small potatoes, but noise and exhaust and experiencing it day after day, multiple times a day, really does degrade
well,
your
it's usually
quality
in
of
an
life.
area specific, like Virginia's always had a problem because they have the hill. Because they had the problem with the brakes, we heard from Virginia, but unless you're in an area that there's only a certain amount of population of concern, because if you're in a level area, you don't hear the truck noise.
It's gonna get worse. I mean, because, the concentration of houses in downtown center is that people that's where they want us to build more.
If you're on a hill, you're gonna hear it. That's like Virginia is a perfect example. They've complained for a long time.
Oh, I've got one vehicle that goes up my road. Honest to God, it hurts your ears. It's so noisy. And so we had some discussion around noise, and we did for the snow machines. Remember that there had to be, they had to meet the standard.
Right, they had to have the
Yeah, right. And so this seems like a kind of a variation on that discussion around when that noise, in fact,
The only way to check that is through inspections, I'm sure it is.
well, that's probably true. That might be true. But I know that there are times when people will soup up these vehicles and they become very, very loud. So what we can do or how we do it, I guess, it's not the first time this issue has come up, but I think maybe you brought it up too. As well.
What happens in South Burlington, the other stretch of 116, they use the engine brakes when they're coming out of the countryside into the city, and I get all sorts of neighborhood complaints. We can't ban them because it's a safety thing.
But some villages actually do have signs prohibiting.
Local ordinance.
ordinances, yeah.
We have that too, we just don't enforce it.
Well, that's a different issue.
And my understanding for the constituents that came to me is they could not, with town, because it was a state highway, they could not regulate it. And I'm looking at legislative council because I don't remember if that was exactly the case in Springfield, but my understanding is town ordinances can't regulate our state highways in that way. So so this is hoping to capture that as well.
Okay.
So thank you so much for your
Okay,
time.
we'll probably do that.
And
Notice.
I know, I
Yeah,
was
yes,
surprised. I
yeah.
thought, didn't even realize you were meeting.
No, we didn't plan ahead. Thank you.
Okay,
Okay, and what do we want to continue on the miscellaneous bill this morning? Miscellaneous bill, is that all right?
Yeah, so we want
Okay.
to close it out.
Yes.
So if we're gonna move to the miscellaneous bill, we did work with Anthea, yeah, I'm gonna actually have Mike take you through
Okay,
a few
Mike.
changes,
All right.
so I'm gonna turn the baton over.
And I don't know, just a quick overview of this. Many of these items pertain to the T-bill, or what are we discussing? That's brought up.
I believe some may be pertinent to the DMV miscellaneous bill and some to the T-bill, and we're
Okay,
happy to
Mike.
talk about all sections.
All right, good, thank you. All right, good morning, Mike.
Morning for the record, Michael Smith, Deputy Commissioner from DMV.
So Lisa didn't mention you yesterday, so.
She did not.
Oh, yes, it is.
No, I'm
I'm
shocked.
the man behind the mask.
I believe it.
Talk a lot about the commissioner.
Yeah, talk about it, but you heard that too. right?
Oh,
He hasn't met Mike yet.
No, I've never met her.
Oh. Well, I'm sure you'll charm her equally.
I believe so. On the record. Okay.
Okay, moving right along.
Moving along.
Okay, so Anthea sent through the latest draft of the miscellaneous bill. Basically, page 2, line 7 and line 14 is where we're talking about mobile identification. We addressed the issue in regards to speaking to it more towards from an identification side versus the driver's license side. She made those changes throughout the entire document.
And you're happy with the changes that Anthea made based on our conversation here?
Yeah.
And this included your language sticker.
I don't see that, so I was gonna put that on the table for discussion.
So that had to do with the showing proof of registration, and that language is with the editors. If you want to talk about it now, I can.
It's the chair's perspective.
Let's keep going. On this and then come back to the, we haven't seen yet.
So let's go through the most we can go through.
So continuing through, that brings us right through to section 5. Section 5, I believe, is ones that were previously closed out. They're highlighted because the numbers changed because she added another section. Yeah. So I think the next substantive change comes on. Along those.
Yeah, all right.
We're agreeing with all this stuff.
Oh, we had already closed it out.
Well, I don't.
Oh,
A lot of it's just validation.
Yeah,
sticks.
Yes, exactly. So we get to section 19, page 23.
oh,
It's
wow.
actually on page 25. Some changes to add unless prohibited by federal law. So again, we support the changes. I think we're hoping for a ways again.
35.
Yes. Okay, so this is where we were speaking about the abandoned motor vehicles. And again, we are supportive of all of these changes that Anthea's added to the bill, adding in law enforcement requesting the vehicle be moved on page 35.
This was the towers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, that's what I thought.
Oh, Chair, I
Yes.
did talk to my fire chief, and he said that they always call this, when they need a record, they call state police, but
Yeah, they
police
call
call the
it.
record. They don't,
Based on their roster.
they don't know, they don't call them.
Okay, good. Works
This
out.
works.
So moving right along to the next page, page 36, where we speak about public identification number and define it. Section 29, she's added in landowner. So that's not really, it's not really.
It's highlighted because there was a definition of landowner. This is when you're talking about the person in, like the legal occupant of the property. In going back and adding in a definition of law enforcement officer, which you'll see on the prior page, There's the existing definition of landowner. So if you look on page 35 at lines 10 and 11, I think a lot of the concern about who is the legal occupant of the property is addressed by this existing definition of landowner. It means a person who owns or leases or otherwise has authority to control the use of real property. So using that definition throughout as opposed to that more clunky legal occupant. This was just something in my case to get you language last week. There was already something in statute that was better than what we were kicking around. But there are still clarification languages in section 29 having to do with, is the landowner like shifting from the abandoned vehicle was potentially on, Senator Kitchell's property. She calls and has it towed. It's now at a towing lot. That then is the landowner for purposes of where the vehicle is. So addressing the fact that the vehicle is moved a little bit more explicitly in section 29, which I think is consistent with some of the confusion the committee had, rightfully so, around the language last week.
Where's the section where we moved, was that we moved to 90 days spot, maybe that's coming. Now we're at section 30, page 37. This is where we've adjusted the fee that is able to be reimbursed from $40 to $125, and the cap has been removed.
In that language, we decided if they called.
You still there? Fuel.
Sounds like chemical burn. Somebody's computers on fire.
The fire or something like that. Somebody's- It's not.
A little bit,
Sounds like
like an electrical.
yeah, electrical
Oh, I can
burn.
smell it now.
They smell it out there.
No.
I can smell it now.
Who's wrong?
Something hot here.
Oh, something's not right. Yeah.
It's getting stronger here.
Should we go off YouTube?
Smells like electronics.
It's coming out of the keys.
Is it?
I think it is.
There's a-
Probably those batteries on fire in the basement.
Right. Sergeant.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, you don't have a mask.
Oh,
Yeah, my
yeah.
kid's sick for the 700th time, so I don't want to get anyone like yours that might have. those.
Wait, it's not strong, it's you.
Yeah, it's
You leave
getting
your room.
stronger. Yeah, it's getting stronger. and it's
Let's leave the
definitely
room.
coming out.
Coming out of there.
We're going off.
Smell something?
Yeah, we do.
Oh, I'm-